In 1861, a man was born who would go on to make significant innovations in the project management system. So much so that his tools that he developed in that time we still use to this very day. So, who was this man and why does it matter for your small business? Let's get into it. All right, everyone, welcome back for another episode of Theory of Why. My name is Rob Johnson, and today I want to talk about the one and only Henry Gantt. So anyone that has been in business for some time has probably heard of a Gantt chart. If you use Asana or Monday or ClickUp, you might see Gantt chart options for your projects that you have built, and that is because of this man, Henry Gantt. So Henry Gantt was born in 1861. He passed away in 1919. And he was a mechanical engineer and he was a project management consultant long before that title was cool. So basically, he put together systems to help business owners understand top level projects and to be able to quickly identify where problems fall inside of that project. And like anything else in history, there's been people that have come up with, models and mechanisms before Henry Gantt. So there's some controversy over, is the Gantt chart really the Gantt chart or is it some other type of chart? But for our purposes today, we're talking about Henry Gantt and what he did with the Gantt chart and why it's important. And a bigger point, we're talking about why project management is important for your small business. So when you look at project management is a system now, there's several different models that people subscribe to and use throughout organizations. Now, the reason why project management is so important is because it allows users to step away from work, think about what they have to do, sometimes execute things in the field, and then go back to a tool and know exactly where they left off and exactly what they have to do. So project management tools are largely under the category of organizational development tools. And there's a ton of them out there. Monday, ClickUp, Asana, Trello, you name it, it exists. And every day it seems like there's more and more of these tools coming out. And why I decided to talk about this today is, one, the Gantt chart is tremendously helpful, but there's a bigger story to the Gantt chart that most people don't know. And we'll get into that in a minute here. But small businesses routinely don't have the project management tools in place that they ought to. They don't have processes and procedures, largely because they're so new, it's difficult to iron those things out in a meaningful way. So what they do is they just kind of run and gun, fly by the seat of their pants, and then as time goes on, they start mapping out those products and processes and procedures. And what I think, though, is that a lot of businesses, they just continually fly by the seat of their pants. They don't really think about things in a context of organization. They just keep running and gunning. And that is exhausting. Not only is it exhausting, it doesn't help the business grow. Because if you don't have a platform that's scalable, then you're always going to stay the same size. And that's why you see these guys who are in the industry 40, 50 years, they're demonstrably overworked. They can't find the right people. They can't scale, and they're just frustrated. And a lot of that comes down to project management tools. Did they want to modernize their industry, or did they just want to stay in the past, right? And we might talk about, the internet and computers and tools like this, but, Gantt charts predate all of that. And these project management tools were in place long before computers came about. And essentially one of the reasons that Henry Gantt wanted to develop this system is because he believed in collaboration between the management and the workers. He wanted tools to be able to bring people together so they could identify problems and talk about them in a meaningful way. And more than that, he believed that workers ought to be involved in the planning. And if there was a really simple way to lay out a project, then they could have more skin in the game as they're helping consult on that project. And I find that to be fascinating because, here we are, almost 110 years removed from, when Henry Gantt was doing most of this work. And today what we found is that people that involve and have workers vested in the mission are more successful. And as I was reading up on this before I did the podcast, I thought a lot about Jocko Willink and what he teaches with extreme ownership, and how he is such a large proponent of making sure that not only are the workers involved in the plan, he believes in empowering the workers to make the plan, because if they have the power to make the plan, they're going to be more vested in it, and they're going to see that plan all the way through to the end, because they're the one that created it. Which is a stark contrast to me as the owner was like, hey guys, here's what we're doing. Get on it and get it to me by Tuesday. Like then it just feels like busy work. That doesn't feel like there's much of a plan in place. And it was so interesting to me, the similarities between Jocko's leadership philosophy and what drove Henry Gantt to create a lot of these tools. And Henry Gantt was a bit of a trailblazer in the respect for workers' rights as well, and make sure that working conditions were improved, and working on safety systems to make sure that workers' injuries were reduced, and that there were more safety measures in place. So Henry really did take a step back and look at organizations from a top-down point of view to see what can absolutely be improved on all of these levels. And how can the plans that we write and prepare ahead of time help make sure that efficiencies are put in place, worker safety is prioritized, and that we're actually treating the worker as a part of the plan. They're in the playbook. They are the ones that are going to be helping draft and execute these plans, which is a really interesting concept, and one that most business owners don't really consider. They just kind of get in this driver mode where they're just cracking the whip and saying, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. And if you don't like it, you can go find somewhere else to work. And what people I think are realizing now, especially in the wake of COVID, is that more than ever, we need to make sure we have existing partnerships and collaborative relationships with people all across the company. And I've even seen this in my business, where I love getting feedback from even brand new people, because they come in with fresh eyes and they're like, well, that seems strange to me, or why do we do things this way? And they're asking questions that are making us think about the way we do things, because sometimes habits just form out of necessity, and they're not really thought about a lot in the long term of the business. So having new people come in and ask really good questions can help open up new efficiencies for the business, and involving the people that are on the front lines, actioning things, involving them in the plan can help make that plan stronger. And moreover, they're going to feel like they have a stake in that plan because they helped develop it. So I love the story of Henry Gantt. There's so much more we could dive into here with a very fascinating career. And it's interesting to me how his legacy is, has been imported into things like, the modern day project management tools, where, you have, the Kanban board, and you have a Gantt style, and then you have traditional and lists, and you have all of these different ways that you can see a project. And one of the ways that you can see it is a way that was constructed over 120 years ago, and is still a standard for how we review and organize projects to this day. As a matter of fact, I first discovered the Gantt chart at my first job, and I was probably 22, hadn't started business school yet, and one of the VPs was like, hey, we need a Gantt chart spun up, and I'm like, what in the hell is a Gantt chart? So I'm over here Googling like a madman, trying to figure out what this thing is, and then I see it, and I'm like, oh, well, that's pretty awesome. We can definitely do that. So then I started to learn more about it and how to construct it. And I'll never forget that. It was kind of my first exposure to this. And then as I, got older and started to realize more of the history of it, I was like, man, this would be an absolutely fantastic topic to talk about on the podcast, because project management tools are something that a lot of small businesses just lack. And there's a lot of free ones out there. Like ClickUp is the one that we use here, and there's a free version of that as well, just so you can kind of get your feet wet and start laying out things. And then as your revenue starts to grow, you can start paying for more premium features that might help accelerate your business as well. So there's a lot of byproducts there. But if you don't have those tools in place, it's going to be a real problem to grow and scale. I'm getting ready to do a talk this summer on organizational development, and I've been starting to sketch out kind of my opening remarks and whatnot. And one of the questions I was going to ask the audience is, so if you have a new person come in, how much of your training is written down and how much of it is verbal? Like how much of it is just from someone's memory versus how much of it is actually written down? And I would suggest that if more than half of it is just from someone's memory, that's probably not a sign of a healthy organization. Because if those things aren't written down and proceduralized, you could have a really bad day if one of your best people that has all the keys to the information leaves, and now you're left holding the bag with no processes and procedures in place. So I think that's a really good litmus test to how well the organization is put together and how well it's structured. So if you're a small business and you think about your company as a whole, where are your processes and procedures at? Where are they written? What type of project management tools are you using to help service a client? Where are your checks and balances in place to make sure that when you have someone new come in, they can understand what's required of them? And every business is different. Like restaurants, you don't have the time to carry around an iPad and be like, oh yes, I have refilled their water. I have done this or that. Like those are things that you cover during training. But there are things like at the end of the night that you might have to, here's how we clean down the kitchen, or here's how we close up the restaurant, or here's how we exchange all of the money or deposit the money or whatever it is. But those processes help keep things consistent, and they also allow you to be able to scale because those documents are doing the informing, not the people. The people are out there earning new business and they're able to grow the company while the documentation is informing new people. And again, it's a balance. It's based on industry. It's not necessarily consistent across every platform. So you have to find out what works well for you. But man, have we seen such an uptick in productivity by having all of our policies and procedures documented. And it's an ever growing list. We're getting feedback from people all the time that says, hey, we need a procedure on this, or we have a better procedure on YouTube Shorts, or, Facebook Meta has changed its back end again. How do we, what are we going to do to update that procedure? So it's a ever growing thing, and that's what it should be. It's a living repository of all of your best advice and ways to do things. So that way someone new can come in and understand it really well. One particular proverb that I keep on a list, it's the second part of like a full statement, but it's basically the opening of Proverbs chapter 2. And it says, my son, if you accept my words and store up my commands within you, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding. But it's that second part, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding. So a lot of this is an openness. Are you open to learning? Are you open to correction? Are you open to change? And are you open to understanding? Do you have a heart towards understanding new things? And, there's all these statements, old dogs can't learn new tricks, and, people are very set in their ways. And you see that as people get older, it can be harder for them to change. Right. And that's one of the things that I am super conscious about as I get older, is I don't want to be in a spot where it's like, man, that's the way we've always done it. We're not changing. And I've tried to model that the best I can in my company, because I always want to have that heart towards understanding. I want to have a heart towards learning something new and have an ear for wisdom, or like being able to learn new things. And that's such a powerful thing. And when you're able to just sit there and take information that's coming in and be able to make a decision that's not filtered through, oh, we're not going to do that. So if our company's always been on paper, that's what we're always going to do. And, it was funny, in the early 2000s, I was in the medical industry, and there wasn't a date quite yet to convert from paper records to EMR, which is electronic medical records. But there was a lot of hospitals in the area that I worked in that started that initiative before it became a law. And the ones that were like, we're always staying on paper, they were the ones that had the hardest time scrambling when things did change. And that just kind of speaks to the importance of being able to understand where the trends are going and where the markets are moving, and being able to put your business in a position to be an early adopter. And a lot of that comes with being able to have, an open heart and open mind for understanding things, and being able to listen to things without putting them through that type of a negative filter. So love that proverb. Very deep. A lot of meaning for me. So today's quote comes from the man that we're talking about for most of the show, Mr. Henry Gantt. So he says, "We cannot drive people, we must direct their development. The general policy of the past has been to drive, but the era of force must give way to the era of knowledge. And the policy of the future will be to teach and lead to the advantage of all concerned." Now, I want to read that again. This is, again, I think, a man well ahead of his time. And this particular quote just resonates so much with me, because it's a lot of how I run my company and what I want people to see when they see what we're doing. And it's why I get so excited about consulting with new businesses, is because I want them to have this type of mindset. And it's refreshing to hear that this existed over 100 years ago. So again, we cannot drive people, we must direct their development. The general policy of the past has been to drive, but the era of force must give way to the era of knowledge. And the policy of the future will be to teach and lead to the advantage of all concerned. And you can tell this guy had a very large heart towards workers and a level playing field and collaboration up and down the chain of command. And that's what gets me excited about, as I, do more historical takes and learn more things. Like there's a lot that history has to teach us about running modern day businesses. Henry Gantt never saw a computer. He never opened a MacBook. He never logged onto the internet, right? But he had a lot of the tools that we use today to make businesses successful. And that gets me excited. And what also gets me excited is this is one guy. What other works out there, and this is just for me personally, but what other works out there have I not discovered that are influential in that way? And that's why I love reading and learning about these things so much, because these are the pieces that help make me better as a leader. And I hope that this podcast, if you're listening, you can find those things that help make you better as a leader as well. So thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And we'll catch you on next week's episode. Take care.